All right, welcome to the next episode of the Rap Thought Podcast. And for this episode, we are going to be breaking down KRS-ONE's
Return to the Boom Bap.
Return to the Boom Bap. Yeah, I'm really excited about this one. I'm a huge KRS-ONE fan.
Yeah, I, to be honest, didn't give a much listen to this beforehand. So this was kind of a newer one for me.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did the Boom Bap come back?
Yeah, well, why did you never check them out before?
You know what? I was born in 88. So you were born in 88 too, right?
Yeah.
So growing up in the 90s in that era, I just didn't. I grew up with my mom listening to a lot of jazz, so that's where I've listened to a lot of music, and I really didn't get into music until the 2000s. So growing up as a teenager, then I was in with the music that was hot then. So,
right.
I don't know. I kind of
I mean, but like by the time you were in middle school, high school, it's the 2000s.
I mean,
KRS-ONE's not really.
He wasn't out there.
He wasn't out there. I think he was still putting out music, but he was definitely not at the forefront of hip hop discussions. Like he wasn't out there. He was pretty underground at that point.
Right. So and I have to say that's why I didn't. He was, like you said perfectly, like he just wasn't at the forefront, wasn't in the, at least when I was listening, I never caught him. So, I mean, I feel it's the first artist that comes to mind of, being a kid and hearing them on the radio is Nelly with Country Grammar. And so, around that time, you're hearing a lot of Cameron and stuff like that.
Yeah, so you're not necessarily going to listen to that and then be like, oh, let me go check out KRS-ONE.
Right. And I feel like that's the same thing with this generation, too. Like, they're listening to a lot of, I don't even know, I'm going to butcher it. I'm not even going to try it. But, if you throw in, like, Method Man, Redman just dropped a new 3 tracks. They're not listening to Redman. But is Redman completely out of the picture? No. He's kind of quiet.
Right, he's still around.
But, so same concept.
Yeah, so KRS-ONE, he had already been around for quite a bit of time by the time this album came out. This is actually his first solo album, which is really interesting. He was with BDP before.
Boogie Down Productions.
Yeah, so starting in the 80s. So KRS-ONE at this point, I mean, he's pretty much a vet. He's been in the game. He knows it. He's made relationships with a lot of different hip-hop artists and producers. And I feel like he utilized that the best way he could have for this album.
Yeah, and I have to say this is kind of, having not listened to him, there's a couple songs I've heard here and there, but very seldom. This is kind of a treat, really, to hear, because I feel like a lot of people think of this is 93. I keep messing
it's 93.
93. People thinking of the 80s. I know for me, the first group people that come to mind are Run DMC, MC Light. But they have a very different style. So I feel like when you think of 80s and early 90s, you don't really want to go back to that era because it's so different. But he's good.
I think this is at the by the time this album came out, the sound that was happening definitely made for, and when people refer to the golden era of hip hop, the sound that they're putting out, especially including this album, it's timeless.
Yeah.
You could go back and listen to this, and this could come out today and it would sound good.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound dated, like you said, with more 80s hip hop, the production sounds dated. You go back and listen to Run DMC, yes, they're great and they're extremely influential and they're amazing, but their production definitely sounds dated compared to this.
Right.
And this is only a few years later.
Yeah, and a lot of that is at a slower tempo. And so he has a very, this is more personal, but like I like his flow. I like his cadence. I like what he's doing.
Yeah.
On the tracks.
Yeah, and KRS-ONE's he's a super interesting character in hip hop, I think, because the way he started, I mean, his first album, he's holding a gun, like a automatic pistol, submachine gun.
Was that on
his album cover? Not for this album, but for his first album with BDP. And I think it was Criminal Minded. So going from that, and like he has this like look of being a thug or a gangster, but then when he's rhyming, he's talking about like he's socially aware, and he's aware of injustice, and he's speaking out against a lot of things. But so like it's he plays the juxtaposition of being criminal minded, but then also speaking truths and speaking out against things.
Right. And that's where I feel, I mean, when we were talking about Tupacalypse Now, and how Tupac, one of his main personas that it's put out there is that he's just this thug and he's arrogant and whatever else, but kind of the same thing of like you have that image, but then you're also spitting, you're talking about true stories and things and your come up and the struggles of being black in these neighborhoods and your lifestyle and everything like that. So
I think I don't know if I mentioned this when we did the Tupac podcast on Tupacalypse Now, but I think I put it down in my notes that Tupac reminded me of kind of like a West Coast KRS-One. Like he's living in Oakland and he's recording the album there, but kind of saying the same things as KRS-One.
There's definitely a lot. I mean, there's some I don't want to say overlap, but there's definitely a lot of similarities between the two albums of, dealing with the police, coming from from poverty, not having a whole lot, resources are limited. It's definitely a similar story, but different at the same time. So I can
and the production's definitely different. I mean, going from Tupac, with Digital Underground, and KRS-One for this album, it's pretty much just him, DJ Premier, Kid Capri, and Showbiz.
Yeah,
and like obviously Premier is probably one of the most influential hip hop producers ever.
When I was checking his age, I think he's in his mid-50s right now.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time.
One of the cooler takeaways was just thinking of him in the 90s and making these beats and everything, and then to Prime in, the mid-2015.
2014 is when Prime came
or so.
out.
And the beats that he's putting out there, like he's not skipping any beats. Like he's still
Oh yeah, I think what the coolest thing about Premier is that like he through his 20 plus year career, he's able to keep his own sound. Like when you hear a Premier beat, it's Premier, but he's keeping up with the times. Like he has production credits on Drake's album.
I didn't know he did stuff for Drake.
Yeah, he did a song for Drake. I forget which album it was, but just knowing that is like, wow, like he's working with so many different artists, and he's not afraid like he does the super underground stuff, and then he'll do a Christina Aguilera song.
I was just about to say, when I was reading about him, I was reading about how he did work with Christina Aguilera, and he was drawing a lot of criticism from it, and he was saying like, oh man, like music, basically saying that music is music. Like I want to be able to do country, I want to do pop, I want to do hip hop.
Yeah, and he's talented enough to do it,
and he is.
Yeah, I mean he caught slack for doing the Limp Bizkit song, but and Together Now with Method Man. Like he didn't want to produce that at first because he didn't really know about Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst, and Fred Durst got in contact with him, basically just told him he's a huge Gangstar fan, huge Premier fan, and he wanted the Premier beat. And I think Premier respected that he had done his homework and he knew about his history, and he wasn't just trying to like capitalize off of him. Like he just generally wanted to work with Premier.
Yeah.
And I think that just shows like how much respect Premier has. Like everyone loves Premier.
Yeah, he's cool. I mean, I kind of to feed into what you were saying too. I like how he's keeping up with the times, but keeping his flavor. It hasn't gone over the top.
Yeah, I think it's so dope. Like to go back and listen to this album that came out in 1993. Like when you hear the Premier songs on here, like that's Premier.
Yeah,
and like it has that distinct sound.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, Return of the Boom Bap. What did you think?
Well, I had listened to this album many times before. Starting in high school, when I was in high school, I like freshman, sophomore year, I dove deep into hip hop and kind of like, all right, let me go back and research and learn about all the the greats that came up during the golden era. Like, let me go back and listen to it. And KRS-One always stood out to me. KRS-One, like, I always thought like he was doing something different than everyone else at the time, and he just put out like great music, and his delivery is unreal. Like, he has such a unique and powerful delivery. Like, when you hear him rap, like, he really like gets your attention.
Yeah, and like I said, like, having not listened to him, I knew of him and I've heard some of his songs. Like, I mean, even growing up with certain artists that were hot at the time, like Nelly references KRS-One. Sublime has a song called KRS-One. He was all over the place. I think he was he on the 8 Mile soundtrack too? I think, or maybe
he might have been.
I may be thinking of Rakim. But anyways, like, he's been around, and I can tell he's well respected amongst a lot of the artists over time. I'm curious to see what current hip hop artists would say about him if they've heard of him.
Yeah, I feel like, because like sometimes I'll be on Twitter and people will talk about KRS-One sometimes that are into hip hop, and they kind of make fun of him now because he's a little preachy, and he wrote a hip hop Bible, and he goes to a lot of colleges and gives speeches and talks about hip hop. And the way he talks about hip hop is kind of preachy. He talks about it in the sense of like being part of the culture and knowing all the elements of hip hop, like graffiti and breakdancing and DJing and MCing, and it's like that very like old school take on hip hop. And he's like, if you're not part of the elements, like, you're not hip hop. Like, that's not, you're into rapping. You like rap. And he makes a distinction between hip hop and rap. And his thing is like, hip hop is a movement, and it's something that you're a part of, and it's a culture, and rap is just one element of that.
I feel like everyone's definition of rap and hip hop are different. I don't know. Mine personally has always been, I feel like with hip hop, I'm hearing storytelling, hearing people share experiences, and I feel like I'm getting a piece of their lifestyle. Or I feel like with rap, you're just spitting bars. You're kind of just getting the crowd going. You're just doing whatever you can, like just putting things, maybe some wordplay or whatever. But that's always been my personal thing with rap and hip hop. But
yeah, and I think on this album, KRS-One does both really well.
He does. He does mix all of them really well, actually. Yeah, kind of like thinking back on all the tracks, there was, like, when we did Tupacalypse Now, like, every song had content to it. So it all was a different element of this one big picture. They're all different colors for one picture. In this one, it's a lot of, there's a couple songs where, for my definition of rap, he's just rapping and going off and having a good time and just doing his thing. But then there's also a lot of like deeper context in the other songs. Right.
I think that has a lot to do with where he's from, being from the Bronx in New York. There's a lot of competitive nature in those areas at that time. Like, there's a lot of beefs, there's a lot of talking trash, there's a lot of ciphers where you're going at people directly and you're rapping at them, and that's just part of the culture. Yeah, I think he grew up in that culture of battling. You're gonna rap battle someone. Yeah, and so he definitely shows that in these songs. Is there a lot, some of them are just battle raps, like he's just going in rapping. Yeah,
and it was cool because, like, that's the first song Out of Here where he's just talking about going to the park to hear rhymes and everything. And I like, he mentions how, like, sometimes the cops would break it up and the hell are they doing. So but it was things like that is just kind of cool. I mean, you see it in a lot of movies where it's, someone on the block, they got their stereo and they're just out here kicking rhymes and stuff. So that's kind of like the picture that I was seeing painted as he was talking about that. Right. Yeah, I thought it was just a good feel too when he's talking about Out of Here. It made me think of. I feel maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel like he was talking a little bit obviously getting out of here, getting out of a tough spot and seeing something different. And I was like, this is kind of a cool song, like just to think of when you're a kid and you're just kind of trapped and like, yeah, I want to be out of here. So I thought a lot of it about that.
After Out of Here, we go into Black Cop.
Black Cop takes goes in a different turn.
Yeah, so he goes from Out of Here to like straight into sending a message, a big impact on Black people at that time in the inner cities.
What's interesting is it's layered. So I mean, for one, just the amount of profiling of police activity that happens, but Black Cop. So he's talking about how basically, in a sense, black on black crime. So, you know, that's already happening in these streets, but now you're having Black people become cops to further, like, not help out the community. And one of the things that kind of caught my attention was him saying, you know, they don't even get paid a whole lot and they're out here going up against their own community. So what kind of message is that sending? Like, we're already being profiled, but, you know, to make it out and also to be accepted in a sense, you're joining, quote unquote, the enemy and attacking your community. And I thought that was kind of an interesting take on that. Yeah,
very interesting. It was almost like he's speaking about like the Black people who become cops are just like they're traitors and they're turning their back on where they come from and turning their back like you said about on their communities. So yeah, really interesting take. I don't know if anyone else was talking about that at that time.
No, I mean, I think the first thing that came to mind was Straight Outta Compton in the movie, because that happened. You know, there was a scene where they were leaving the studio and then there was a Black officer and two white cops, and the Black officer was doing all the work and trying to apprehend them and everything. But, you know, so it's like reference, but you're right. I don't think that it was occurring a lot in music. Just, you know, the cops as a whole in general, but he's really, you know, focusing on Black cops. Well, yeah, but then going back from, you know, just kind of spitting rhymes to talking about some context, and the next one, Mortal Thought, he's just kind of taking a step, because throughout his album, you get the feel that he really has a respect for rap and for hip hop and doing his thing. It's a way of life. And so in this track, he's just talking about, you know, I would basically not wanting to sell out. I won't sell out, but then there's a lot of these fake clowns out here that are, you know, putting together some garbage to try and sell and just trying to make it.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like where the title of the album comes from. You know, return of the boom bap, return of the real hip hop. Because I think at that time, you know, you had some artists that were, you know, popular. You got MC Hammer and Vanilla Ice and like some of the other artists that aren't necessarily making the type of hip hop that KRS-ONE would make, but they're profiting off of it and they're super successful. So it's interesting. Like, even though he doesn't call any of those artists out specifically, he's kind of talking in general of like, I'm making real hip hop and I'm living it, and I'm not here to be the number one selling artist. Like, that's not his goal.
And you guys are out here putting out trash and selling out, and you know, he said it's whack. But, you know, I don't know. Makes me think of a lot of things. I mean, I think of, you know, in an I can't quote the interview, but there's an interview with Tupac where he's talking about, you know, basically if you don't hear a lot of the thug stuff that's happening in radio, you're gonna hear a lot of party stuff and everything, and how that's gonna take over. And it just makes me think of now how there's not a lot of content in hip hop. Man, there is something playing, and I was like, I personally don't like country a whole lot, but I was like, I will turn on country before a lot of. I was listening to a Spotify radio playlist, gotcha. And yeah, it just, I wasn't feeling. It's like, I'm gonna listen to country before this. This is ridiculous. So I just think of like Tupac and KRS-ONE being those, you know, that we've reviewed those two so far, and just what their thoughts would be on this right now. Just people putting out some whack material.
It's interesting. It's almost like the more money that's involved, the less content there's going to be, and the less like consciousness is going to be involved.
And that's what Pac was saying in that interview. It's pretty bad. But, not that the next one being I Can't Wake Up is, in that realm at all. But I like how it goes. His album just has like a good mix of, context to like, all these other people are whack to just having fun with it. So I like how in this song he got rolled up, and it made me think of Scary Movie 2. Yeah, he got rolled up and smoked, smoked by the weed though. But like he's just pass it to Bill Clinton. He talks about how he doesn't inhale, so he gets slapped, and then it gets passed on to the next person.
And I think what was cool about this song is that like he was shouting out all of his peers at the same time. Like he's shouting out the people that he respects. He's shouting out like Rakim and the various other artists that are of his kin.
Right.
So it's like a funny song. Like he's just dreaming that he is a blunt and he's being passed
around and stuff.
Passed around, and it's a cool concept. It's different. It's just.
Yeah, because I was like, I wonder if, this is how like if you smoked with all these people, so that's what they do, and then incorporated it in. But I don't know. I thought it was.
I thought it was just a cool way for him to shout out people that he wanted to shout out.
Yeah. I liked it. But it's, another one of those short ones like that. And then kind of going back to kick and rhyme. I feel like for a lot of the songs I put down kick and rhymes. So kind of just spit and rap, doing the MC thing,
right?
So slap him up was kind of the same for me.
Yeah, he's showing off his ability. Like I think that's just part of the culture, especially at that time. Is just showing off your rapping ability, showing that you're better than the next guy, or that you're the best, or that's just very much a part of hip hop.
Yeah, and kind of real quick, like with those, I got the same sense with Mad Crew. And with and Stop Frontin', with just a lot of kind of kick and rhymes, but the rest of the ones up from there kind of get into some context and everything. Sound of the Police goes back to talking about the police and everything again, and there was kind of a cool. What I'm really liking about these old hip hop albums is that it's one thing to just say, "Hey man, the police suck ass. Like I don't want to deal with them," but actually giving a kind of painting a picture relating them to something else. So in this one, he's relating them to plantation owners in this sense, because they're both rolling around on horses. They're both maintaining law and order. They both have authority. And it's just it's an image and a thought I've never that's an interesting combination right there.
Yeah. I mean, the part of the song when he goes from, officer, he says officer over and over until the word turns into overseer.
Yeah.
And it's like that's a really interesting concept to think about. Like going from where black people had to deal with overseers on the plantation, working them to death, and just kind of like not letting them have any freedom, where all they're allowed to do is work and go back to their wherever they're living, and that's it. It's like you're being watched at all times,
right? And no disrespect to cops at all either. I mean, but just in that line, overseer. I mean, a teacher on the playground during recess, officer, a security guard in the mall, they are overseeing to make sure things don't happen. In these regards, we're of course talking about people that are profiling people and being over the top, but overseer and officer still, like it makes sense to me, putting those two together. It's like, you're overseeing something, you're whatever, but I thought that was really interesting. That one kind of stuck with me.
Yeah, I mean that's a powerful song. It's a catchy song. Like it's got like a catchy hook and obviously the beat, and he makes it fun to listen to, even though it's kind of like a harsh topic. Like like it's a fun song to listen to.
Yeah, it was fun. And speaking of fun, like transitioning to I liked that one a lot too, because I mean, so for work, I see this with certain kids. I mean, it's not like you and I growing up where, I mean, I remember I probably didn't start using cuss words until, I would say religiously, like using a cuss word. There's like the occasional, hey, you're an ass. You're like, oh my God, you said ass. But like, It wasn't until high school where it's, every other
part
word.
of your vocabulary.
It's just part of your vocabulary at that point.
Yeah.
Where working with some of these kids, and, as early as even, like between 8 and 10, it started to become part of their vocabulary. Where for us, it was like in the later teens. And I think of the current generation right now when I hear this song you see all these hip hop artists doing their thing and just they're soaking it in more to where they want to act this way. They want to act cool. They think that sagging's cool. They think that, talking with a certain lingo, being from the streets is really cool. There's one kid in particular that I'm working with right now that is kind of like that. But in this song, he's talking about, this kid's walking around with a strap. Mothers, of course, doesn't want him doing that, doesn't like the persona or anything. And I don't think that anyone, at least none of the kids that I'm working with, I don't think any of them are packing heat and bringing guns with them. But in this song, he's talking about how that same kid, though, who's influenced by the hip hop culture to over the top influence, is walking around with that gun and it goes off. And there's a car on the other side, and there was someone happened to be in that car, and he shot that person. So even though this person was acting hard, they think it's cool. They shot this person, and now they're acting like a little bitch, basically. Right. They're really not about that life, which is not surprising.
And then in the same song, I think in the second verse, he talks about the white kid that wants to be black, and he's with a group of other white kids from suburban area, and they're in an area where it's they're not from,
right? And
they get into a fight with some black kids, and they get beat up, and
they took a bat to him, and he was completely outnumbered. They took a bat to him, and but he got up. He was good to go, but he had a strap. He was about that life. So when he got up with the gun, and then they froze. They caught those bullets. But between the two stories, and I think the first time that I listened to it, I actually thought it was the same kid, but that I could see that being two different ones. But it's still the concept of, there's people that are walking around here that are influenced by the culture, but they're really not about that life when it actually comes to it.
Right.
And then the people that are somewhat like that and are willing to challenge other people, but then those people are actually about that life and they will put you in your place. And I thought that was kind of a cool mix.
Yeah, he's just trying to show that, some people are trying to be a part of that lifestyle for absolutely the wrong reasons. And, they're trying to do it for how it'll make them look and how it'll make them feel, and they're doing it by choice, when the reality is the people that live in those situations don't want to be there. They don't want to be in that place.
Right. That's the last thing they want to do. But they're doing it for protection. They're doing it because that's what they have to do to survive. These people from the burbs coming out there, they're not in the survival mode at all. And so, you want to listen to the culture and be about it, but you don't know anything about it, and things happen. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah. And, a lot of these albums too are I personally, being black, I like them because it's about, black empowerment. But at the same time, if you really take away, if you're willing to take away the black portion of it, a lot of it can be really held for anybody in a sense. Right. So, the song that we were just talking about, that can really go for anybody, listening to these cultures. The officer, the overseer, that can really go for anybody. That could be anybody that is, anybody that lives in poverty is going to, most people are going to know about these.
I think that what you're talking about, that there's a deeper view to it with hip hop, in the sense of how I always thought about it, being white and listening to hip hop. Obviously, hip hop was created by black and brown people, but they never like when it was created, it was never to separate.
Right.
Like it was always inclusive.
It was always inclusive, and it was also to bridge too. Like, hey, we're telling you about our stories of what we're doing, what's happening here.
So when I listen to it, it's not that I want to live that lifestyle. I want to be that. It's more of I'm interested in the stories they're telling, so that I can have a better understanding, and just being a part of the story. And then like I gravitate towards the music part of it, the production part of it, and then I enjoy poetry and I enjoy lyricism, and just lyrics and just breaking it down, and I like storytelling. So hip hop incorporates all of that, all of those elements. And most hip hop artists, especially at this time, like, I think they're making music from themselves and for black people, but they're not like, white people can't listen to this, or white people shouldn't listen to this or be a part of it. Because I think they understood that if they tell their story and they get it out there, white people will have a better understanding of where they're coming from, and be able to relate to them a little bit more. Yeah,
and I'm sure that there's someone out there that said, I know that there's people out there that have said, white people shouldn't be doing this stuff, but I feel like the prominent people that have classic albums and stuff, I haven't heard, I can't think of a person in that realm that's been like, this is there is someone, I can't remember, but this is basically an exclusive club. But I appreciate the storytelling, and it's real stuff too. Like, and it's stuff that anyone can relate to, because you don't have to be black to living in a shithole and in poverty and to be profiled. Anybody.
Yeah, it's hip hop is always, like you said, bridged the gap, and it's brought people together more than it's separated people.
Yeah.
Hip hop is universal. I mean, it's in every continent, it's in every country, and all people feel it. Like it's for everyone. But at the same time, in the same token, people do take advantage of it, and white people or non-black people do use it to their advantage, or are not as genuine as they should be being a part of it.
Oh yeah, I mean, we can go into Elvis another day.
Elvis, and then you can go all the way up to some of the white rappers that we have today.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, when I was speaking of empowerment, I was thinking of his song "Brown Skin Woman," where it's basically. Let me get this thought off real quick first. But where he's basically uplifting them and saying, "You're not a hoe. You're a queen. You need to respect your body. It's a temple and all this stuff." But when in our intro session that we did, one of the things that was brought up was like, getting rid of that stigma of hip hop, that it's about drugs, it's about degrading women, that it's about just this culture that's not the whole thing. And so, in a lot of this music and stuff that we'll be talking about in future podcasts, but this is like a prime example of like women weren't degraded in this album.
Absolutely.
Drugs weren't overused.
I always get really kind of frustrated when people that don't really listen to hip hop talk about all the negative aspects of it.
Right.
But it's like, well, have you listened to the past 30 years, 40 years of hip hop? Like, do you have an understanding of all the different artists and different songs that are out there that don't do any of the negative stuff that you're speaking about? Like, that's only a small portion of hip hop music.
And I'm kind of curious. I mean, I would love for someone to if you were to lay out 50 albums or so, and it's like, tell me which ones are heavy in degrading women or in drug use or anything like that. And of course, that is out there. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's not the entire picture. I don't even think it's 50% of the picture.
Right.
I don't know if it's 25% of the picture. It's a very small component. But I mean, and if you want to look at songs, over artists over albums, I would still say that's a very small population. Probably shouldn't put things out there I can't back up with facts, but like that's my belief. But at least with the artists that I listen to, it's not a lot of that. So, but I mean that's a good segue into this is my favorite song of the album. P is Still Free. I love the beat. I just feel like that's when I think of like a DJ Premier beat, that's what I think of.
Yeah, classic beat.
Yeah, just the beat was so sick. It was definitely my favorite on there.
Yeah.
But this is kind of relating to the drug use and everything. But there's people that are on drugs that are out there, and they do things just for that next high. That is not a surprise. That is not anything we haven't heard. But he's talking about his experience with that in this song with Denise, and I was like, oh man, I remember her, but she hasn't made any improvements. She has a kid now. She's definitely still on drugs, and she's on the streets. She's trying to get me for something. I'm on my way to a show, and she's trying to make a transaction, and he's not about it. And I just thought this whole song was cool. Sad, I guess, but it was also cool. Then he goes to the show. He knows all the MCs there. There's a lot of whack ones there. And then Denise happens to be there with her friend that is a 3-month-old and is like, hey, I need to go change my kid. But hey, if he's ready to do this thing, then we can do that. And I need this money. And then the friend, it sounds like a friend of KRS-ONE is just like, yeah. But he's not. They get into a fight. She licks a shot off and everything. And then she gets stomped like wine. Which it took me a second to understand that line. I was like, stomp like wine. Oh,
well, yeah, because they used to jump on the grapes.
Stomped out. Yeah, I was like, oh my, okay.
That's a cool picture to put in.
Not a cool picture, Matt, but it's I was like, oh, she got stomped out.
I'm talking about the grapes part, not the person.
I was like, damn, she got stomped out. But then, it takes another turn in the third verse where, she's basically there's some fellatio action, some deep throat, which is what he said. Then she bites his dick off, and then she checks his wall and is like, wait, you're not broke. And so that's just all that she is willing to kill someone or to severely injure somebody for that money.
Right.
Curious to see how much money he had in there, but I don't know if I'm going to be, putting people into the ER to look in your wallet. But
it's crazy.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. The last song on the album, Higher Level.
Higher Level. That's the one song I think that from when I first listened to this album when I was in high school, Higher Level always stood out the most to me out of all the songs in this album. Mm-hmm. That one, I always had that in playlists. I always wanted to every few years I wanted to revisit that song. I think what I like about it is that it just kind of makes you think about a lot of different things on a deep level.
On a deep level, and it's one of those too that again, as we said in Tupacalypse Now, it's still relevant to today.
Yeah,
you think about the 2016 election, and when we had Hillary and we had Trump, and a lot of people were saying, vote for the lesser of the two evils. In this song, he's talking about politicians, they're not here to save us, and then noting that voting for the lesser of two evils is still voting for evil. And so that really stuck with me, quite a bit. It's people will tell you. I remember people just even, back with Obama, people want to hate on him for whatever reason, and that's fine. But they're just well, he's the lesser of the two, so you should just vote for him. And I don't know. It's well, even if the whole argument that, if you vote for a third party, that's a vote for the person that we don't want. So just vote for the lesser of the two evils because we know this person will get in. But, it's do you do that you're still voting for evil, or do you want to stick true to your morals and your values and place that right vote? So it just made me kind of think about that a little bit. But he had a lot of stuff in here that really had me going back and thinking.
One of the things that stood out to me was he mentioned the army, like be all you can be, from those commercials where they're trying to recruit people to the army, but it's like he's pointing out that like they really don't have your best interests. Like they're not really trying to get you to be all you can be. They're trying to get you to do what they want you to do.
And he mentions how, a lot of them that come back worse than when they went in. And we, to this day, we still have trouble helping these individuals out when they come back. So, this is 93 and it's 2020 and that's still relevant. Talking about the voting for the lesser of the two evil. I would argue that's more prominent now than it was then. Or at least it feels that way.
Yeah. And the other thing that he pointed out, he talked about God and Jesus, believing in Jesus, and talking about a white Jesus.
And how I want, a God that looks like me and, shares the same values as me and everything. Because that's true.
Yeah, he says, I want a God that looks like me and a God that I can trust. I don't want a God that only blesses America.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
I respected that too.
Yeah, that always really stood out to me as well, where like when you really think about it, like when we say the Pledge of Allegiance or we look at our money, it's God bless America, but what about the other billions of people on this earth? Like is God not supposed to bless those people?
Right.
Like
what does that mean?
Right. Like, yeah, it's a strange concept to me when you really think about it.
In him talking about God, a question that he said in this song was, would Jesus vote? And that got me too. Because I was like, I'm not religious though. I don't know if I would call myself spiritual. I have my own things that I believe in, but I was like, would Jesus vote? What would that look like? What would he do in these instances?
Right.
But I like how he talks about too, freedom is within ourselves. It's the education. And I agree with this, the politics and religion are not bad for what they are. I've always felt with religion, it's probably the people that I don't like. I have respect for the book, but it's the people, because everyone has their own interpretation of it. So that's my own thing. But then he mentions how the education is where it gets lethal. So, there was a rhyme about the lesser of two evils, but the education we get is lethal. And I thought that was
well, because it all depends on who's doing the educating.
Right.
That's a powerful tool to control people, is to educate them on certain things, and then at the same time not educate them about certain things, being selective with what people are learning about.
Yeah. And but that whole song just had, those are only the few that I put down, but there are a lot of nuggets in there of just deep stuff that, like I said, is still relevant to today.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff is always going to be relevant. That's those kind of questions, those kind of topics that he's bringing up, especially with things about God and the different political things, that's always going to be relevant.
Yeah,
those are, but they're fascinating things to really sit down and think about, because we don't normally ask ourselves those questions. We don't normally, those kind of things don't normally come up in conversations with people.
And I think that's the point of the title of the song is higher levels, contemplating these things, debating about them, talking about them, puts you on that higher level, because we're so used to and ingrained to what life is. We don't question things very often. And if we challenge it, it gets stifled pretty quickly. But, being on that higher level to be cognizant of this and to debate it and bring it to the table and see what happens. And, that's the message that I got out of this song. And overall, the whole album was really cool.
Does this make you want to go back and listen to all the BDP albums and KRS-One's other solo albums?
Yeah, not only it makes you want to go through that, but also just the whole era. It doesn't get, for me, I feel like it just doesn't get enough light. But I'm curious to see, to go back, see what Boogie Down Productions was putting out. I definitely started looking more into DJ Premier, because, it's one thing, you hear someone all the time, but then when you see that they were significant in a lot of other projects, then you're like, okay, like I need to see what these other projects were because they've all been great so far. So yeah, man, it's been good overall.
Yeah, and KRS-One has a lot of material out there. He's probably got close to 20 albums over the years. I mean, with groups and with collaborations and stuff like that. So he has a lot of material out there, and most of it's good. Like even the albums that came out later in his career, they're still good albums. I think he maybe not has kept up with the current times. He may not be as popular as other artists from his era, like a Nas or Jay-Z or whatever. But he's still relevant to today. And like, if you can see him live, like he's one of the best live performances I've ever seen.
Did you see him?
Yeah, I've seen him. I saw him live once in LA, probably like 8 years ago. But seeing him do what he did live was like, it was incredible. It was one of the best experiences I've ever had seeing a live performance, like of any genre. Like it's just crazy. Like he has so much energy, and he's pretty much like freestyling the whole show.
Yeah, that's legit. It's cool to be able to see, one of the pioneers in person.
Yeah, I think another thing that we didn't touch on, he had a ton of reggae influence.
He did.
In this out, like the way he rhymed, and he used a lot of reggae, like the Jamaican accent. He is Jamaican. He was born in the U.S., but I think his family is from Jamaica. So he had a lot of like Jamaican accents throughout the album.
Yeah,
and I just thought that was a cool, thing that I think he did it, because it adds a certain style. It's a unique style.
It's a very unique style.
And then he can like use that to rhyme different words together that you wouldn't normally be able to rhyme.
Yeah, and it's one that like not a lot of people are doing either. So it's just kind of a cool touch to bring to the album and everything.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the album. I don't know if it's one of those that. No, I'm playing this in the background as I'm doing things. I remember there's at work one time, we were playing spoons. We had Wu-Tang Clan in the background. Like it was just kind of just a lot of fun. Like this is something I would play in the background. I would share with other people.
Oh yeah, it's a fun album to put on. Like if you're just hanging out at home with some friends.
What was your favorite track on the album?
I mean, besides Higher Level, I would say I like Out of Here. I like Return of the Boom Bap. I don't know. I like all. I mean, all the songs are great.
Yeah. I was on the plane listening to this, and I put on P is Still Free like 4 or 5 times. Like the speed is it's too sick.
Yeah.
But Higher Level, there, I would say I have 2 favorites. P is Still Free because it's a fun song and I really like the beat to it. But Higher Level just because I really like songs that make me think and really just kind of question what is.
Right.
And yeah, it just had me questioning. Why would Jesus vote? I don't know. Just things like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Especially with these older ones, how they, like I said, they're still current, and it's a mix of sad and that's really cool because it's cool because you're talking about something that's hasn't aged or it aged very well. Right. Where it's like sad because this is still a problem. So.
Yep.
What do you?
The Boom Bap came back.
I came back.
But did it like in '93? Was Boom Bap gone? Like
I don't think it would. I don't think it really left.
I don't think it really left. But I think he was just trying to make a statement.
Yeah, but
like today, I think Return of the Boom Bap would be a more like relevant album title.
Yeah, because in the title track, he does mention it's the return of the real hard beats and the hard rhymes.
Right.
And everything and just being original. So I think that's what the more of like the content and the heart of hip hop is what he was bringing back. I think that's what he was bringing back. Because again, he was talking about how a lot of things were whack and something else.
Yeah.
But he brought it back.
Hell yeah. So yeah, that is KRS-One's Return to the Boom Bap.